Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Ura and I'm the Codeholic. Recently, PHP 8.0 was released with a bunch of exciting improvements and new awesome features such as union types, named arguments, attributes, constructor property promotion, WeakMaps, just-in-time compiler, and much more. In this video, I'm going to go through most of these changes and understand what have been actually changed, and we're gonna see this in the code. One of the most exciting feature is just-in-time compiler, or shortly JIT, which, as it is written on many websites, should give us a huge performance boost in PHP 8.0. So let's understand how JIT actually works and how it might give us that huge performance boosts. So on the following image right here, we have the process how the PHP script execution goes. So first, the PHP engine starts tokenization of the PHP scripts. Then it parses the PHP script, parses that tokenized parts. Then we have this compilation phase where after the parsing, the PHP engine will create abstract syntax tree, and then the compilation goes and the execution process starts. So the thing is that the JIT basically uses opcache to cache already compiled the PHP script and don't compile it later if nothing was changed inside that script. Okay, let's have a look at the second image. So right here, when the engine is about to execute the PHP script, it first checks if there already exists a compiled version of that PHP script in the opcache. So if there is no cache, then the standard process goes. So it starts the lexing, tokenization, and then parsing, and the compilation creates the abstract syntax tree, and then saves that in the opcache, and then finally executes that. So if there already exists the script in the cache, then it simply takes out that from the cache and executes. So that gives us a huge performance boost in certain cases. So if you have a huge code and you're executing this with minor change from time to time, then it will save the code in the cache which is not actually changed, and it will only execute the source code which is changed. So this is how basically JIT works. I commented and pushed all the source code I have written in this video, and here's the GitHub repository, and you can find the link in the video description as well. Okay, now let's write some cool features in PHP 8. So this is the setup I prepared for us. So on the left side, I have on localhost port 7400, there's running PHP 7.4. On the right side, we have PHP 8.0 running. And in my PHP store, right here, I have set up something for us. So first of all, if you are going to use any of the changes I'm going to describe in the video, which belongs to PHP 8.0, you need to make sure then that in your composer JSON, in your require, you write that your script basically is dependent on PHP 8.0 or above. So if you don't do this and just write the code, write the syntax which is common for PHP 8.0, but not the older versions, and deploy this on production, it won't work. Okay, so make sure you have in your require that your project basically depends on PHP 8.0. Okay, then right here I have an index PHP, which simply requires autoload PHP, and in the source folder, I'm going to create one file for one specific feature. And just like this, we're going to include that file in the index PHP, and we're going to immediately see the output in the browser and see how the PHP 8.0 code works in PHP 7.4 as well. Okay, and the first feature I want to discuss is named arguments. So I created that file, named arguments, and I required that in the index PHP. In the arguments, I have the following code. I have a numbers array, and I call two functions on that numbers array, array filter and array map. So they are absolutely different functions. and they work on the arrays, but the thing is that array filter first accepts the numbers and then the callback, and array map first accepts the callback and then the numbers. So the parameters given to the functions are sometimes confusing in PHP. Another example will be, for example, if I want to detect the position, strpos, I will call that, and first I have to specify in which text I want to detect something, hello world, for example, and then I have to specify what I want to search for inside that string, for example, world. And then finally it gives me the position, the world position inside that hello world text. And as I mentioned, sometimes it's confusing for developers. Let's actually take out that position as well and dump this information. And let's have a look in the browser. So refresh that, and right here I see the position 6, and I also see the var dump, the result of that arrays. I can put this in the pre tags as well, just like this. Have a look. Okay, so these are the even numbers and these are the squares of the given numbers, because we call array filter and array map. And this works obviously fine in PHP 8 as well. Okay, now I'm going to convert this using PHP 8.0 syntax. In PHP 8 we have possibility to specify the name of the argument we're going to pass. So right here I can write numbers. Actually, this should be the name of the argument which is written inside the array filter. So I'm going to follow using my control and mouse on this array filter, and I can see that right here it accepts the array and the callback. And the same happens on the array map, just in a reverse order. First callback and then the array. So I'm going to specify that the first argument is the array. So this is the array I'm going to pass, and this is the callback. And do the same thing right here. If I don't remember the ordering, I'm going to write numbers first, but I know that it is an array. Array will be numbers, and callback will be just this one. So right now my PHP Storm just puts the red underline down below because it doesn't support PHP 8.0 syntax. At the moment I'm recording this, there is no stable version of PHP Storm which supports PHP 8.0 syntax. There is a beta version, which is the 2020.3 version. You can write this PHP Storm 2020.3 beta or without the beta in the Google, and you can check out the link which comes from jetbrains.com, and it will open the following page from which you can download that beta version. Okay, just download that exe file or your operating system. It has all three, and you can download and install, and it will have support for that. Okay, I'm using that version 2020.3, and if I want that red underlines basically to disappear, I'm going to mouse over on that, and I'm going to click on that switch to PHP 8.0 language level, or go to the file, settings, go to the languages and frameworks, PHP, and I'm going to choose right here PHP 8.0, hit OK on that, and that basically disappears. Okay, and now let's have a look in the browser. So in the PHP 7.4 we have unexpected colon. It's a parse error, syntax error. It doesn't support that syntax, array colon something. However, on PHP 8.0 it fully works and we have the same output. We can do the same thing right here. So I can specify always the haystack first. So haystack colon, and look at this, PHP Storm already autocompletes that for me. Hit enter on that, and this is the haystack, this is the needle, and save that and have a look in the browser in both versions. Basically refresh. On the right side it works, on the left side it obviously doesn't work. Even if we comment out these numbers and just leave that haystack and remove that variables as well, it still doesn't work. The main idea of these named variables is that if you just don't remember the arguments, you can pass needle first and hashtag second. Just make sure you specify these names of the arguments and it will work in PHP 8 without any problem. Okay, now let's talk about the union types. I have created right here 02 union types PHP and included in the index PHP and commented out that named arguments PHP. So now whenever I access in the browser, that union types file is included. Okay, now in the union types, I have written the following code. I have a class, sample class, with a number, with setter and getter of that number. And in PHP 7.4, I know that I can specify right here the type of that number, whether it's an integer or float. But in this case, I need both. So the number can be integer and float as well. And the only way to specify this so that my IDE understand that is through these doc blocks. So I specified right here integer or float. And that's all I can do. I can specify both types right here. But thanks to PHP 8.0, we have this possibility. So if I specify right here integer or float using the pipe notation, so we can see that in the PHP 7.4 we have a syntax error, unexpected pipe right here. However, on the PHP 8.0, this works fine. I can also specify this right here as a return type, integer or float, which works also fine in PHP 8.0. This works not only on primitive types like integer, float or string, but that works fine on classes as well. I can specify right here that this can be either datetime or it can be like exception class, for example. So I save this, I see, let's have a look. So I see an error on the PHP 7.4, but this works fine on the PHP 8.0. Also, you can specify that union types right here as well. So the public number is either integer or float. So in all places where you set or get or declare your number, you can specify union types, which can be built-in classes or custom classes or primitive types. Okay, let's talk about the next exciting feature, which is constructor property promotion. Right here, I have created a person class with 3 properties, first name, last name, and age. And I want to create a constructor. So I'm going to generate the constructor using PHP Storm for all the properties, and here I have it. So for simplicity, I'm going to remove the doc block right now. So I have written that first name, last name, and age in 3 places. In the properties declaration, in the arguments, and whenever I assign them. And this is a valid code and works fine in PHP 7.4, right? But I can change this using the new syntax, using constructor property promotion in the following way. I'm going to delete that properties right here, and I'm going to delete the assignments right here as well, and I'm going to add right here public. So public string first name, public string last name, public integer age. And that works in exactly the same way. And let's check in the browser. On the PHP 7.4, this gives us syntax error, unexpected public. However, on PHP 8.0 side, we don't have any output, which means there is no error. So this works perfectly. This is an amazing feature when you have many arguments, many properties which you want to accept in the constructor and the property names are long. So definitely great feature. Okay, let's talk about the next great feature which can save you huge time in writing code in PHP. This is called Null-Safe Operator. Let's say that I have a session variable received from some source and I want to take out the country from that session variable. But the country is inside a deep nested object array, associative array of that or object. So right here, I have a session object which has a user and the user has address and there is a country inside that address. And every time when I access some property of the session, I want to check if that property actually exists or not. The session itself might not exist, it might be null. So I'm checking if session is not null, then get the user from the session. If the user is not null, get the address from that user. And if address is not null, then get the country. And finally, I have a country, I can use it however I want. But this is very long code. In PHP 8.4, we have a special operator for that. So I'm going to paste the code right here, which is the version in PHP 8.0. So right here we use the question mark. So session, question mark, and then the arrow operator on the property. That basically question mark checks if the session exists. If it is not null, then go and continue to the user property. If it is null, actually, then the country will be stay null. So if there is that user, then we continue. We have another question right here, then go to the get address. The good thing right here is that I can use that question mark operator on the methods as well. And this line basically is equivalent to the following line. So if I simply save that and access that in the browser, let me just create a session as a null variable so that we don't have an error about that. And if we just access this in the browser on the PHP 7.4, we have a syntax error right here, unexpected error right here. It complains about the line 17 right here. However, on PHP 8.0, this works fine. We don't have any error. If I just delete that session variable and it is undeclared, on the PHP 7.4 we have the same error. On the PHP 8.0 we have this warning undefined variable session. Next one is minor, but let's cover it as well. So the next one is trailing comma in parameters. Basically, when we create a function right here, if we have multiple parameters or single parameter, we must not have comma at the end of the parameters in PHP 7.4. But in PHP 8.0, we can have just comma and unnecessary comma right here, and we don't have any problems about that. If we just have a look in the PHP 7.4, we can see syntax error unexpected parentheses right here. It expects a second argument. However, on the PHP 8.0, we see normal output hello Zura. So we can specify right here other arguments like age and comma, and that works basically in the same way. If I remove that last comma on the age, this works fine in PHP 7.4 as well. However, we have another error, we just don't specify that age. So I'm going to specify right here age, save that, and right here we don't have this error anymore. As soon as we put right here comma, then PHP 7.4 complains about that, but not PHP 8.0. Okay, now let's talk about the next great feature, which is match expression. So that basically is equivalent of the switch, but in a simpler version. So this is a normal switch case statement, which in this case gives us warning in both PHP 8.0 and 7.4 because we don't have that status code variable available. So if I just create status code to be anything like 300, for example, then we don't see these errors nor in PHP 7.4, neither in PHP 8. So I'm going to paste right here a code which is equivalent in PHP in PHP 8.0. So here it is, match, and we specify status code, and then in the curly braces we specify an associative array. So whenever status code is 200, we don't need anything to do. Whenever status code is 300, we need to return null. Whenever status code is 400, we need to return not found, and so on. And in default case, when status code is other than this, we just return unknown status code. And if we just print that message down below, we can see that in PHP 7.4 we have a syntax error unexpected comma on line 22, and we can see that this is right here. However, on the PHP 8.0 this gives us null simply because we specified the status code at the top to be 300. I'm going to specify change this into 400, and we can see that on PHP 8.0, we have this not found text. So this is PHP in PHP 7.4, but we can do in a simpler way in PHP 8.0. Okay, now let's talk about one of the biggest change in PHP 8.0, which is attributes. So what usage does the attributes have, or how can I use that attributes in PHP 8.0? Right here I have created product subscriber class with two methods, onProductCreated and onProductDeleted. Whenever this onProductCreated is called, we accept productCreated event instance, class instance, and on delete we accept productDeleted event, which is an instance of the productDeleted, obviously. So I'm going to add right here now attributes, and the syntax is the following. You use hashtag and the square brackets, and inside the square brackets you specify right here the attribute name. And I'm going to create right now a absolutely new attribute. By the way, there already exists a couple of predefined attributes. For example, deprecated is one of them, and right now my PHP Storm auto-completes the deprecated class, which is actually called an attribute class from JetBrains PHP Storm namespace, but we can use just deprecated as well as an attribute without the namespace, or there exists JIT, for example. So this is not available in the PHP Storm's auto-completion, but that attribute exists according to many sources. All right, so I'm going to create new attribute. I'm going to call it listen to. Okay, and let's go to the attributes folder, and I'm going to create this. So that's going to be class listen to. And let's delete this doc block, and I'm going to add attribute right here. So the listen to class basically is an attribute, okay? And I use now this PHP's built-in class, which is attribute. So if I just follow this, it will redirect me to the core where we have that, let's scroll at the top, where we have that attribute, final class attribute, and yeah, that can be used. Okay, so right here, I'm going to specify in the listen to, first of all, I'm going to create a public property, which will be string event. And in the constructor, I'm going to generate the constructor and accept that event. Okay, so this is my attribute. And now I'm going to specify in that product subscriber, in the listen to, I'm using that listen to, and I can import this one as well using Alt and Enter, and that was imported right here. And I can specify right here the constructor argument event, and that's going to be the product class, which I have created right here as well, event created. So product event created, and I'm going to add the same type of listen to right here on the onProductDeleted. So listen to product event deleted. What does this do? Actually, how can I use that? So if we have a look in the browser so far, we won't see any difference. So that's simply because the PHP 8 actually supports this as an attributes, but in PHP 7.4, starting anything using hashtag is actually a comment. So if we go to the settings in PHP Storm and change this into PHP 7.4 and hit OK, that basically underlines that this is not supported, but I actually expected this to turn into a white or gray to understand it as a comment, just like in this way. Okay, actually, if we have a look in the interpreter, we don't see anything simply because it is treated as a comment. So let's turn this back into PHP 8, hit OK on that. And now how can I test this? If this really is an attribute, how can I use it, or what advantages it has? I can use right now reflection class. Okay, so let's create reflection class equals new reflection class, and I'm going to specify the product subscriber class right here. And then on the reflection class, I can call a couple of methods. So the reflection class has getAttributes as well, but right now this will return an empty array because the class itself doesn't have any attribute. So we can have a look on the PHP 8 and we see an empty array. However, on PHP 7.4 we see an error call to undefined method reflection class getAttributes. All right. Let's add one attribute to the product subscriber, hashtag and square brackets and attributes, just a simple attribute. And on PHP 8.0, we see that reflection attribute. Okay, nice. Let's get the attributes now from the method. Okay, on the reflection class, I'm going to call, let's write here, I'm going to call get method and I'm going to specify on product created. This is the method name. And let's save it in a variable m and semicolon, and on m then I'm going to call getAttributes, and let's actually put this in the var dump instead of the class getAttributes. Save that, and on the right side we see reflection attribute again. But in order to get the name of the attribute, let's access the first element and get the name of that. So now if I refresh this, I see that the attribute name is UpAttributes listen to. I can get the arguments of that attribute as well. Get arguments in this way, and we can see that it accepts right here created. Okay, this is what actually was passed right here. Actually, I can add these attributes into many places, not only on classes and methods, but I can specify these on the arguments as well. Right here, for example, hashtag and square brackets, and I can specify right here attribute in this way. And then actually I can access that event variable attributes later if I want. I can add these attributes on arrow functions as well, and there are many places. I can even specify multiple attributes if I want. So for example, right here I can specify that this has an attribute and listen to as well. And now when I get the attributes on the method, let's have a look, refresh that. Attribute cannot target method. Yeah, that's important thing which I haven't mentioned. The attributes have different targets. They can target to the class or method or function or attribute or etc. Okay, and this attribute cannot be targeted to the method. However, if we just copy and paste this attribute and call it sample attribute, and let's call it sample attribute as well, and let's leave the inner content as it is right now, I can add that sample attribute now to that on product created. It's accept some argument. I can remove that argument and just leave it like this, so it's an attribute without any argument, let's say. And right here when I call the get attributes on the right side, I should see where it is on line 13. The attribute cannot target parameter allow target classes. Okay, where is that? Right here. So the problem basically is right here. It can target the parameter. The allow target is basically class. Okay, reload that, and now I see right here two attributes, and we only see that this is a reflection attribute, but whenever I try to get the name, so for example the first attribute name will be the sample attribute we see right here, but the second attribute name will be the listen to. Okay, so this gives us possibility to use that attributes and to generate some things in the frameworks, and that is already adapted in a couple of popular frameworks like Symfony, for example, and I'm going to show you an example of that as well. But previously you had to write some doc blocks, and it was parsed doc blocks, so you had to write here listen to, you pass right here the created, for example. It was like this before, but now you can use that built-in features in PHP. And let's actually see an example of Symfony. So here is the official page from the Symfony, and this is actually the old way how you write that routes. So basically this specifies that public function SumAction is a root function, and it's part of the sum controller. That's why it's a root function, and the path using which you can access to that function is the /path. And you can also give the name to that specific action. Okay, and if we just write this in the Symfony, you can access in the browser /path to that specific method. However, in PHP 8 we can do using PHP 8 attributes, hashtag and square brackets, and you specify route right here, path, and the name is action. And that name colon basically is also a part of PHP 8, which is the named parameters. Okay, this gives a huge possibilities, and that's going to be adopted in today's popular frameworks, as I mentioned, and also the doctrine, which is the ORM of PHP, and it is fully dependent on that doc blocks, and it's going to be changed and use that PHP attributes. Right here we see that there exists a required attribute, and you can just add the required to some service, and just like this it will be required, or you can add that required to the method as well. So this can be done like this. To get back to our example, so adding attributes doesn't mean that it will automatically call that method when the new product is created. So this needs to be managed by the source code, by the PHP code as well, but this attribute is a simplified version instead of doc blocks to add some additional information to the methods. Also, that passing that product event created right here doesn't mean that it is not actually connected to the arguments of the method. So these are just attributes, are just additional information added to the methods, which can be used later in the application. For example, in our application later, there can be a register code which actually will take all the methods of the product subscriber, will read all the attributes of each method, and register an event listener, so that whenever that product event create is triggered from somewhere in the application, and that depends on the specification, on the framework, or etc., then it will call that on product created. So one more thing, also right here I have added 2 attributes, but I can actually do this using a single notation, single hashtag, let's call it like this. So I'm going to delete this one and delete right here as well, and specify comma, and let's move this down to show this on the next lines. And just like this, I added 2 attributes on the onProduct created. Again, if we have a look right here, we see that the first attribute is actually listen to. So nothing basically changed. If I move this listen to at the very top, and comma should be specified right here, then I actually formatted the code. Let's indent it properly. And right here I see that the second is now sample attribute. When you create new attribute, you can specify the target on which the attribute can be added. In this example, we added the listen to attributes to methods, but we can change actually by specifying in the constructor. Okay, I'm going to specify right here attribute target class, or target function, or target all, or method or parameter or property. So we have all the options we want to use, or it can be even class constant. So this is a constant, we have a property, we have a parameter of the function or method, the method, function, class, any place. So right here we need to choose the method, and it will be valid because we added that listen to the method. If I change this into target class, then I won't be able to add that. I won't be able to add that to the method which I did before. Let's now see all the examples where the attributes can be added. It can be added on the class using this way, class attribute, and you can add multiple attributes as we found out. We can have property attributes, we can have constant attributes, we can have method attributes, but the good thing is that the attributes can be used normally with the doc blocks. So you can put the attribute at the bottom of the doc block or above the doc block. That's totally fine. We can have the attributes in the arguments of the functions. We can even have on the closure functions with arrow functions. Down below we can see that we can have the object attributes just like this, or function attributes. We can even have the basic calculations in the attributes. So right here I have a couple of attributes pasted, and we specify right here 1 + 1. Right here we specify that the PDO class, and we specify right here a constant, and we specify another constant, or we can use the bit shifting right here. So all that is possible in PHP 8 attributes. Okay, let's talk about the WeakMaps. And before that, let's fully understand how the referencing of the variables of the objects work in PHP. So when you create a new object, there's a memory allocated for that object saved somewhere, but there's also created a reference to that object. And if you just assign that reference to another object, there are basically two references to that object. This is the exact case right here. So we created a product P1, and then I assigned that P1 reference to P2. Now there are two objects pointing to the same product, which is this object right here. Now after that, I unsetted the P1, but there is still a reference which is saved in the P2, which points to that object. So right here, if I just reload in the browser, we see unset first. So unset is called right here. Then we print the object, and then the destroyed is called right here, which is the destructor of the class. Okay, but the thing is that destructor is only called at the end of this file. So even though I called unset on the P1, the object is not destroyed because there is a reference still exists on that object, which is P2. So if I just remove this line P2 and remove the var dump, okay, so right here if I reload the page, we see that the first object is destroyed. So this line basically caused the object to be destroyed, and then we print the unset. And this works in the same way in PHP 4, so that's the same. But that was like the introduction of what I want to say about the WeakMaps. So in case of WeakMaps, when we put the reference in the WeakMap, when we actually try to unset that object, the reference of the which is saved in the WeakMap is not counted. And the object will be still destroyed if there are no other references, actual references like P2 reference on the product. Okay, let me repeat this once again. So when the object is about to be destroyed and it has only references in the WeakMap, that WeakMap references are not counted and the object will be destroyed. Let's see an example of this. So right here I have introduced a reviews variable, which is an instance of the WeakMap. And inside that reviews, I put on the product P1, these are the reviews added on the product. Let's say that these are number of stars received on that product. Now I call an unset on the P1. So logically, there is still a reference because we have that P1 inserted in the WeakMap, which reference to some reviews. So let's print right here the whole reviews WeakMap object, and right side we see that this is my reviews. So we have that reviews right there. And let's actually print that reviews after I call unset. Save that and refresh the page, and now I see that the WeakMap becomes an empty because there is no non-weak reference to that product, and that's why the product is actually destroyed. And we can see also that the destroyed is called before the unset is printed. Let's see another example of the same thing, but in a complex way. So right here, I have a review list which has private WeakMap cache right here. In the constructor, we just create an instance of the WeakMap. Then I call getReviews and pass the instance of the product. And the purpose of the getReviews function method is to go and grab the reviews for that product and save it in the cache if there are no reviews. If there are already reviews grabbed for that specific product, then serve it from the cache. So in this case, we just return the following statement, which stands for find reviews for that product ID and set it inside the cache. If there already exists some value for that product inside that cache, just return that. There is that find reviews, which takes the product ID and maybe selects the reviews from the database. Okay, down below we create an instance of the review list. We call that getProduct method 2 times for product 1 and product 2. And then we have the reviews of these products inside the following variables, reviews underscore p1 and p2, which are just called getReviews. Whenever we call that getReviews first time on the p1 and first time on the p2, this just grabs that reviews from the database, but save it also in the WeakMap cache variable. So down below, if I just grab the reviews again for the p1, and I pass right here p1, product 1, it will use the same reviews from the product cache, okay, from the WeakMap cache, which is right here. Okay, down below, if I call it unset on the product 1. In a real applications, of course, you don't call an unset on a product 1, but there will be cases when there is basically no reference applied to that product 1. It was like created in a scope, function scope, and lost or something like this, and the product will be actually destroyed. And this is the exact case, even though that we have the reviews of product 1 in this variable. So we have in 2 variables, reviews p1 right here, reviews p2 right here. They both hold the reviews. As soon as the product is unset, the reviews variables, these ones, will become null. So they won't contain reviews anymore because that product 1 was unset, and thus from that WeakMap cache, the value for the product 1 was also destroyed. If we try to execute this code in the PHP 7.4, then we get the following error: class WeakMap not found. In PHP 8.0, there is possibility to define the variable type as mixed, no matter it's a function return type or the argument. So right here I have mixed a, which means that if I call the following function on PHP 7.4, we get an error: argument 1 passed to set value must be an instance of mixed integer given. That basically means that the PHP 7.4 reads that mixed as a class type. So that's why it writes this. However, in PHP 8.0, this works without any problem. To see the getValue example, right here we have a different error in PHP 7.4 that the return type of getValue must be an instance of mixed, but int returned. In PHP 8.0, this works fine. You don't have to specify right here question mark that this needs to be null, or question mark right here, because mixed contains null type right there as well. So if I just return null from here on the getValue in PHP 8.0, this works fine. Next new thing in PHP 8 is to throw an exception from new places. Throw basically was used to be a statement, and it changed from statement into an expression. And now we can write that throw new exception in this if condition. So if we run the following code, let's actually understand this code. So we have a divide function which accepts a and b, and if b doesn't equal to a, then we return the a divided on b. Otherwise, we just throw an exception cannot divide on 0. So if we execute this in PHP 7.4, we get the following error: unexpected throw. We can't actually use the throw in such cases. In PHP 8.0, this works fine, and we get an uncode exception cannot divide on 0. This is a minor thing, but now in PHP 8 you can call that static on the objects, not only classes. So if we run this in PHP 7.4, we get the following error: can't use class with dynamic class name. However, you can do this on the PHP 8. In PHP 8, we have also possibility to have non-capturing catches. So which means that I can remove that exception right here. So in this example, in the try, something went wrong and we don't know what exception was actually thrown. We catch it, but we don't care what exception was thrown. We just want to write something went wrong. This code obviously works fine in both of the versions, PHP 7.4 and 8. Now, I don't want that exception, so I don't want to save it in a variable. I can leave this like this, and in PHP 7.4 we have a syntax error. However, this works fine in PHP 8. There are also new functions when working with strings in PHP 8. For example, if you wanted to detect if a string contains a substring, you had to use strpos, if strpos, then the haystack and the needle if that doesn't equal to false. However, in PHP 8 there is a new method which is called str_contains, and this will simply return true in this case. There are two more functions, str starts with and str ends with, which simply checks if the specific string starts with this one or ends with stack. That is most of the changes that have been made in PHP 8. If you enjoy the video, just leave a like and comment down below. If you are new to my channel, hit the subscribe and the notification bell button, and also follow me on Twitter. Thanks for watching and see you in the next time.